Mac Thornberry, Chair of the Armed Services Committee. Just about exactly 2 years ago, I was visiting a Marine base and talking to one of the pilots who told me the story about going to a museum to get a part that he could use on his existing airplane in order to keep his existing F-18 flying. And then I talked to the mechanics there who talked about working nearly around the clock, just trying to keep the planes flying, many of whom, probably most of which, were older than they were. So we started digging into these issues in all of the services and found that the damage done by congressional budget dysfunction went far deeper than I think most of us realized. That dysfunction has had a human cost. As y'all may have heard me say before, in the year 2017, we lost 21 service members to hostile action. We lost 80, just about 4 times more in training accidents than we lost to hostile action. The CAP deal that leadership announced today begins to repair our military. And for me, that's the highest priority of the federal government, because it is fundamentally wrong to ask people to go out and perform missions for which they are not fully prepared, fully trained, fully supported with the best this country can offer. And that's what we've been doing. And we have had too many accidents, too much loss of life as a result. The Secretary of Defense testified before our committee yesterday that in every domain of warfare, air, land, sea, outer space, cyberspace, we are losing our position. This CAP deal is necessary so that we can begin to make up some of the ground we've been losing. And so for me, it's very clear. There's lots of other things in the CAP deal, lots of excuses people can use to vote whichever way they want. But fundamentally, this is about the United States military. And if you vote yes, you're voting to fix the military. If you vote no, you're voting against fixing the military. And for the families of those 80 service members who we lost last year, it's that simple. I am incredibly privileged to work with the men and women behind me who are part of the House Armed Services Committee team. They have been committed all year long to fixing our military and doing the right thing by our service members. And I want to thank them. I thank the Speaker for his commitment that has brought this CAPS deal that enables us to do what needs to be done for the military. I think a few of them are going to make some comments, and we'll start with a gentleman from Wisconsin who has recently served himself in the military, Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, sir. When I was in the Marine Corps, we used to have a saying. We said, you ride to the sound of the guns, which basically means if you see a problem, you don't ignore it, you don't run the other way, you confront it head on. And I ran for Congress because I saw what was happening to our military, what was happening more broadly to our foreign policy, and I wanted to be part of fixing that. And I didn't want to punt that problem to someone else. And so that's what we're here to do. And I know this is going to be a difficult vote for a lot of people, but I just would implore my colleagues to step up, do the right thing, take that vote on behalf of our military, on behalf of the American people. Let's ride to the sound of the guns. Let's get this done.
I'm Liz Cheney from Wyoming, and there's no more important or sacred obligation the United States Congress has than providing resources for our military. And for far too long, because of policies of the previous administration, because of the Budget Control Act and sequestration, we've actually been doing the opposite. We've been increasing the risk to our men and women in uniform. This CAPS deal is hugely important because it gets the money that the military needs. It gets the funds appropriated. We all of us on this stage know that we've also got to deal with our fiscal crisis, but the way to do that is not on the backs of the men and women in uniform, not on the backs of the Defense Department. We need to appropriate this money. We need to get this CAPS deal done. I join the chairman and my colleagues on the committee in urging our colleagues to vote in favor of this deal, to provide the resources for our men and women in uniform to begin to do what we're asking them to do. We have seen a significant increase in the threats we're facing across the globe, while we've seen a diminishment in our military capacity and capability. So I'm very proud to serve with people on this committee, and very proud that we've got a CAPS deal that actually provides the resources the military needs, and I look forward to being able to vote in favor of it shortly. Thank you.
Brad Winstrup from Ohio. I've served 20 years in the reserve, and I did 1 year in Iraq as a surgeon. And there's nothing more sobering than when you see the passing of one of our troops. And the fact that there were 80 last year that died in training accidents is very sobering and should be sobering to all of us. And there's a reason for it. And it's because of the lack of training and equipping that is necessary. And I see it on the medical front too, where we aren't even there where we need to be or where we had been before, as far as being a medically ready force and ready to serve our troops medically. And this will fix that. This will help us get to where we need to be. And if we don't serve as a deterrent, if our military can no longer serve as a deterrent, it's going to cost us a whole lot more. What I am glad to see is that at least for the next couple of years, our military will no longer be held hostage as we're trying to legislate in other areas. This is very important. As you know, it's important to everyone back here, and I think it's important to every American, and especially to the families of our troops. And I'll be followed by Mr. Turner from Ohio.
Thank you, Brad. I'm Mike Turner from Ohio. Today, our men and women in uniform win. They win as a result of a battle that the Armed Services Committee members behind me have been waging over the past year to reverse the Obama administration cuts to our military and seek increases that would begin the process of rebuilding our military. Our men and women in uniform have suffered, has the capability and the capacity of our military. This begins the process of reversing the cuts of sequestration. It gives us a 2-year breather to begin that process of reinvesting and modernizing our military to respond to the issues not only of where we have active conflicts, but to avoid conflicts in the future by building a military that will deter those who might wish to do our country harm. There is still much more work to be done. This only sets aside sequestration for a period of through 2018 and 2019. It is important, though, that we turn to the important issue that the President has called upon us, and that is permanently setting aside the sequestration that has been placed upon our military as a result of the legacy of the Obama administration. A majority of the Republicans on the House have endorsed reversing sequestration. I'm certain that they will support this 2-year setting aside of sequestration, but we then to move on to setting aside sequestration permanently. I certainly wanted to give tremendous credit to our chairman, Mac Thornberry, who has fought not only to set aside sequestration and to achieve this budget deal, but also for these increased budget numbers. We would not have these numbers today but for the leadership of Mac Thornberry to ensure that we reverse the processes of cuts and go to a period of increase. This will now give us the ability to talk about what our military should be doing instead of just how to get resources to it so that our military can survive. Thank you very much. With that, I turn back to our chairman, Mike Thornberry.
Okay, y'all got questions? Ma'am?
Mr. Thornberry, why is it necessary to have such a large increase that's even above and beyond what the president had requested?
Well, as you may remember, when the president's budget request came to Congress in May, there were exactly 2 Senate-confirmed officials in the Department of Defense. One was the Secretary Mattis, and the other was Air Force Secretary Wilson, who'd been there about a week. So when that budget came over, they took the Obama budget plans and had a small adjustment based on some decisions we had already made on personnel and sent that over. The longer they've been here and really dug into the depth of our readiness problems, seen what our adversaries are doing, Secretary Mattis, as he said today, completely supports the cap agreement that in the numbers before us. This is what is required to begin to fix our planes and ships and readiness. But as Mike just said, it is only a beginning, but it's a 2-year beginning, and that's part of the reason I think a lot of us are supportive of it.
Over here.
Sir.
You discuss that the money would be going to fixes, but would a lot of it also be going to new weapons programs? Do you have an idea how much is going to repair and how much is going to new systems?
We have broken, yes, we have broken that down. And if you look at the Defense Authorization Bill, which has been signed into law and passed with overwhelming bipartisan majorities, it gives you much more of the specifics. But I just want to emphasize one thing, which I have realized in the 2 years we've been focused on this. It takes twice as much money and twice as much time to fix an old 1980 model F-18 as it does a new F-18. Some of the only way you're going to fix some of these problems is to buy new planes or ships and so forth. So it's not a simple look at the maintenance accounts versus the procurement accounts. Procurement is necessary when your aircraft are sometimes much older than the pilots that they are flying. The one other thing, there's clearly new capability we need to buy. And one example I'll just mention is we've got missile defense systems that help protect the country against a launch from North Korea, for example. We need more interceptor missiles in that system, but we also need to research more effective ways of missile defense, and this is a beginning on both of those, as an example.
And just one quick follow-up. The President has talked about having a military parade here in Washington, maybe on July 4th. Is that something that you think is necessary or wise? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I don't know that it's necessary. I guess my reaction is anytime you can show appreciation and admiration to the men and women who serve in the military, that's a good thing. But the best way to show it is to support this budget and make sure that they have planes that fly and ships that sail and have the training they need for the missions. The worst thing we can do, whatever we say about them, is not support them adequately for what the country asks them to do. Ma'am?
Have you talked to the members of your party who are concerned about the domestic side of this agreement or other issues with this agreement, or do you plan to? And how confident are you that this budget deal will, pass?
I think it will pass. And by the way, I suspect every person here has concerns about it, would write it differently than is currently being written. But that's not the choice. This is a negotiated compromise. And I think the people who are concerned about the consequences of debt have very good points. There are real consequences to mounting debt. At the same time, there are real consequences to not providing the resources to fix your planes and ships, and we saw some of those consequences in the past year. The one other point, just for a little perspective, remember that the defense budget is 15% of the federal budget. If you wiped it out totally, if you did not spend a single dime on the military or the Department of Defense, we would still have a deficit of substantial size. So the concerns about the debt are valid, but you're not going to fix them by cutting our military or by failing to provide the equipment that our troops need. Yes, ma'am.
So, Joe, just to follow up on her question, are you sort of on the armed services Republicans going to work to convince the other members to vote?
Oh, I am. Look, this is really clear to me. Some of the other CR votes were not so clear to me because CRs were bad, shutdowns were bad, it was. This begins to fix our military. So to me, it's a very clear-cut case. Are you going to help fix our military, or are you going to find some excuse? And I think our highest obligation is to defend the country and the obligation we have to the men and women who are risking their lives to do that. Sir?
fighting that's gone on for the last several years, how valuable is that?
I suspect every person behind me has visited with military commanders or others who have had an impossible job of trying to manage effectively the resources they are given with Washington budget dysfunction. It's simply impossible. So as maybe Liz or somebody mentioned a while ago, having a 2-year deal so that we end the budget drama, so that they can manage resources more effectively, is an enormous step forward that will benefit the military in and of itself. Plus, they get the additional resources that are needed to begin to rebuild and repair and to develop some of the new capabilities we need as we fall further and further behind in relative position to some of our adversaries. So I think both are very important. And I'm sorry, and one other thing is somebody else also said, I'm repeating, also the military can no longer be held hostage to other things. We've just been through weeks and weeks of holding the military hostage to domestic spending or to an immigration issue or something like else. This hopefully frees the hostage.
Just as a follow-up, as this is sort of putting the budget in line with the administration's strategy objectives, how much of the work of the committee is going to be, legislating towards the defense strategy, the administration's defense strategy?
Well, as you know, we had the Secretary talk about the strategy yesterday. I think a lot of our focus will be to stay on top of the rebuild and repair efforts, make sure that we build the capability we need for the future, and also continue our work in reforming the department. The Secretary's also been very strong. This fiscal year, the department will be audited, and they will find problems, and that's what an audit is for. So reform as well as rebuild and prepare for the future, I think we're gonna be very strong with. So, Colin.
Can I get your thoughts on the second year? I know obviously one part of your designs was to increase those caps substantially, but I think also to get some other substantial increases year over year. Is going from 700 this year to 716 next year good enough for you? And are you going to allow that you might go above that?
Yes, it's good enough. The only reason I hesitate is I cannot tell you for certain what will happen in the world, so could there potentially be some additional OCO demands if there's conflict in the Korean Peninsula or something, of course. But I think, as we were just talking, stability is enormously important, and the stability that is provided by this deal is such that I think all of us think it's important to stick with this agreement. Let me go here, and then I'll go back to Roxanne.
Speaking of the future, Deputy Defense Secretary Shanahan has stated that 19 is a step up, but the real build-up he expects will come in 20. So are you guys going to start working now to secure an even larger budget for 20?
Look, we got to get this one passed. We got to do this. I'm serious. These guys, I think, share my conviction. We got to get our planes fixed, and we got to make sure that our sailors get the training they need to avoid running into tankers. There's some basics that need to be done here. There's no question that the Pentagon builds its budgets far in advance, and so I suspect that it will take a while for the new strategy to fully inform the budget requests that come up for us. We're supposed to get 19 here in another week or so. So, I mean, I think that's a fair point, but for us, we need to take it a step at a time. Ma'am?
Mr. Chairman, you've expressed concern recently about the inability of the Pentagon to spend a lot of there's going to be a huge increase in defense spending. What measures are you taking, and are you talking to appropriators about putting specific language in the omnibus bill to make sure that the money is not, one, being wasted, and that the Pentagon can actually spend the money on operations and maintenance the account that expires at the end of this?
Yes.
Can you tell us what
No, I have been talking with Kay and Rodney and the speaker about making sure that no artificial limitation Congress imposes prevents the Pentagon from spending money wisely. You still have to have accountability, and as you point out, there's different colors of money that can be spent over different periods of time, but I do think we're looking at some additional flexibility because, like you say, it's going to be 6 months before they actually have the money to spend, and they have limited contracting officers and so forth to write the contracts to spend it. So some flexibility makes sense, and we're looking at some of those options. We're trying to provide them with some of those options. So, yep. All right. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.